second, but what I think would be good is for this session, we're going to have Dr. York talk to all of you on needs finding and interviewing and skills that you'll need while you're going through the clinical immersion process. And so before we get started, why don't we have each of you go around, just say your name, your major, what you're studying, and then also why you're interested in Blue Link. Just pretty quick here so John can get to know you a little bit.
Yes, sir. Sure. My name is Derek Bunderton. I have a background. I did my master's in bioengineering, and I'm currently in a master's for business analytics over at Rady.
Okay.
And I really wanted to do Blue Link so I could learn about the holistic approach for creating a medical device and really what are all the little intricacies that have to go into it.
This big data is a great business opportunity in the medical space too. So very good. Nice marrying of the business analytics. That's great. Pleasure.
I'm Leonard. I'm doing a PhD in nanoengineering, and I'm in Blue Link because I'm really interested in the interface of science and business.
Great, super.
I'm Stephanie, and my thing I'm studying right now is business, and I have my background in engineering too. I just wanted to basically know how to start a company in the medical device.
Okay, good.
I'm Austin. I'm studying bioengineering, but I would say I specialize more with entrepreneurship. I'm currently trying to start a company, and I'm in Starter's current cohort. You know what that is. And yeah, I'm really excited and passionate about entrepreneurship.
Super. You got it.
I'm Sean. I'm a medical student, and I'm interested in how innovation can help patients get better faster, hopefully preventatively.
Yeah. So innovation can be just not just a process, product, but maybe doing something from a process standpoint that can improve patient care. Good.
Hi, I'm Jessica. My background is in engineering, but I'm a first-year med student now. In the past, when I've worked in engineering and industry, I've always noticed a gap for physicians who understood product development and wanted to work on new products and innovation as well.
Engineering, you said?
Background is engineering, but I'm a first-year med student now.
Okay, that's it. Okay, so 2 meds, 2 business, a 3rd business here, right? And engineer, right? Grad?
No, I'm an undergrad actually.
Undergrad, okay.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm also a medical student, and I joined Blue Link because I wanted to learn how to find problems and then devise solutions that can solve those problems.
Okay, super.
Hi, I'm Akash, and I'm an electrical engineer specializing in wireless communication. I'm into Blue Link because I want to apply the electrical expertise into the field of healthcare, and it's really interesting.
Super.
Hi, I'm Gopesh. I'm a 4th year mechanical engineering PhD student. I've been fortunate enough to work in a lab where we're doing medical devices, but I've always been interested in trying to commercialize them, and I'm particularly interested in devices that can have a positive socioeconomic change. It's because my background, I grew up in a 3rd world country.
So, to expand on that just a little bit, I'm just curious about that in terms of triple bottom line. So what do you think about in terms of positive social change?
So whatever device I work on, for one, the dream situation would be if it can impact a large number of people who are living below the poverty line in the world, and so specifically in a 3rd world country. In particular, I'd like to target areas which, if you're familiar with Bill Gates' chart on DALYs and disability adjusted life years, and diseases like pneumonia, early infectious diseases, etc. But that's obviously a long-term goal. In the short run, devices that I can engineer and we can make work, low-hanging fruit at least, would be the stepping stones. Try and target the big areas eventually.
Great. No, there's a lot of talk, especially in Europe. There's the whole conversation going on about not just that we start a business. Commonly we think when we start a business, oh, I'm going to be in there, I'm going to get a great idea, and I'm going to make $1 zillion, and I'm going to relax at the beach. But realistically, there are a lot of folks who start businesses with that in mind in terms of, can we make this world a better place? Can we improve the quality of life for individuals who may not be enjoying the riches of this country and the opportunity of this country? So I run into that when I was in my MBA with a company in the Netherlands that was developing some things for developing world in terms of the vaccine, dealing with a vaccine issue, SNVR, as well as our Argentina project. No, Chile project. So my team that I was working with, Gal, she was looking at vision screening for children, especially going to Asian areas. I built a campaign about, I'm trying to get some money so I can go tour Chile doing this, but basically want to go to Asian areas, do a photo tour, but make people aware of the need for vision screening, which we take here for granted here in the US. Most kids in third world may not get their eye screened until they're like in their teens. So, good. So a few people who come in.
Did you want to just introduce yourself briefly, what you're studying and why BlueLink interests you?
Sure. So I'm Udit. I'm doing my PhD in the electrical engineering department. I do my research on basically we're trying to use stem cells and biomaterials and 3D printing to recreate various human tissue types. And I'm part of the BlueLink team putting the program together. I am coordinating with the engineering school for whatever needs that we have open.
Fantastic. Great.
Alex Boone, graduated in bioengineering in 2015 here, and now I'm in MBA program, Flex MBA, and BlueLink because I wanted to create an innovation that can save more lives than I could as a doctor.
Fantastic. That's a number of this business as well as science and engineering. You definitely have to have both tools and skill in your basket, okay? Not just your science side, but also your business skills.
And so I'm volunteering for BlueLink, helping out with coordination and things. But I'm an MBA student, flex evenings, and have a historically computer engineering software background, but want to move into product management. So not figuring out how to build it, but what to build it. And so any type of innovation thing is really piques my interest. And what they're doing here is a very interesting, structured, and innovative way to create new products. So I just want to tag along for the ride.
Fantastic.
So you can see that we got some amazing young leaders and innovators. So it makes it that much better to be a part of this program. And so we're
enthusiastic group here.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent as well. It's my honor and pleasure. So, what do you want to know about me?
What's your background and what are you passionate about?
I'm gonna go sit down.
Geez.
So we pick things up.
I took the dog picture out. That was one of my passions. I actually am passionate. I've owned Akitas for 25 years. I named my company against my Akitas, and I just had one of mine this weekend. So they're like our kids. So the dogs are our kids. I'm passionate about the dogs. I'm passionate about animals and making sure that they have a good quality of life and that they have a good home. All right, my background. All right, so any questions about my background?
Your degrees, and then if you can give us a brief on path from grad school or bachelor's degree.
Okay, cool. So my degree is, I'm a pharmacist. Okay, I have Pharm D, University of Michigan. Any other questions? So I also have a postdoc.
Are your slides on auto? Or
They may be on auto. Oh my God.
I don't want to give it away.
Let's go back to point 0.
And I wonder, would you mind using the microphone? Is that
We just need to go find, I'm going to escape and get out to point 0. All right, we started point 0. Whoa. All right, so because I know Garrett's going to have the hook in about an hour, and Rebecca Coe probably talk for 2 hours on this topic. I'll give you, so pharmacist, postdoc is the first postdoc industry fellow for the pharmaceutical industry, 1985 at Rutgers. I was with Warren Lepper Park Davis. I had a nice little career in the pharmaceutical industry, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen. I did sales and marketing at Amgen, so I was a product manager for Epogen and Neupogen. And at a little company called Allergan down the road, I was a global director for medical marketing back in about 2000. I started my first of 3 businesses in 2000, knew nothing about starting a business, even though I had been in business for about 16 years. And that was a restaurant over in San Clemente. The things you have to know about a restaurant is the 2 best days of a restaurant are, 1, when you buy it, and 2, when you sell it. I learned that my consulting business generated more cash to be able to support the restaurant, which is my other passion. I love food and wine. Okay, and it was on the beach, but I didn't do my market research. I didn't ask enough questions about the business to understand the health of the business, the seasonality of the business, understand whether this was really going to be a good investment. Not just money, but also of time, because you're trading off in terms of your time when you take on any venture. And this is like driving me crazy because this thing is going backwards. So, second business, I was working in the advertising business with the East Coast Agency. We started a business called Ophthalmic Research and Education Consultants. We had it with a physician. We did it for 2 years. We did actually pretty good. We did about $1.5 million of business off Merck in about a year and a half. Partners did not get along well, so we dissolved that business. So take home number 2, and you do a business, make sure you're partnering with people that you can work with, because it's almost like having a family. Everybody has to be committed, okay? And we went through a lot of knockout, drag-out fights there. Business number 3 is Akita Biomedical. I started because I was already working in servicing the industry. I had worked in the industry. So that took hold. So the other lesson you learn is, guess what? Sometimes you're going to have to swing a few times. If you hit on the first time, great, but you know, it gets in your blood. You find a lot of entrepreneurs will have 4 or 5 businesses and maybe have struck out 2 or 3 times. Okay? You just have to hit one big to really make it worthwhile. But that third business took hold, and we developed a very nice consulting business that to this day is still very active. In 2012, I decided I had some gaps. Even though I had a rich business background from the real world and practice, and I went to the Kelley School of Business for my MBA. And I, in there, was involved with a variety of things. I started the healthcare club, did a variety of consulting engagements, and we actually consulted with a startup that was over in Europe that was dealing with emerging technologies, dealing with the SNVR, which is the vaccine issue that we have to deal with in developing worlds. Okay? So that was part of a program that we call Agile. And that was one of the unique things that we had at Kelley. So I finished my MBA about 1.5 years ago, and just continued both with my consulting, but I picked up, because there was another professor by the name of John York over at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. It happened to be I was writing a capstone paper because I was a mentor here at UC San Diego in the von Liebig I-Corps program. So I go to John and said, John, do you know any more literature here? So we get talking for coffee. He says, hey, by the way, I have a class called B310, which is Introduction to Entrepreneurship. We put 600 students through it a year. We have 6 sections 3 times a year. It's a flipped classroom concept, and it's built off basically the lean startup concepts. These are going to be concepts that we're learning as you go through LINC. And started teaching there, and I picked up the marketing because I'm a marketing guy. So I also teach senior projects marketing, and I'm teaching introduction to marketing at on the MBA level as well. So I wear a few different hats: science, communications, as well as marketing. So when you're an entrepreneur, you have to wear different hats, because sometimes you might just be even doing the pots and pans, as I know so well. That was business number 1, by the way. So that's a little bit about myself. I want to structure this presentation with, you know this book by Simon Sinek? You ever heard Start With Why?
Yep.
Okay, great businesses start with why. Okay, great leaders start with why. So this talk is going to start with why. So 3 parts are going to be a little bit of why. Why do we ask questions, and why do we do interviews? 2 is going to be how do we do interviews. So I'm going to walk you through, and there's going to be a lot of information, and you'll think that you're drinking from a fire hose. I'm more than happy to give you my slides and to tape this so you can go back. This is probably one of the most important skills that you will have to be successful, because you need to understand what's going on in the environment. because you need to understand your stakeholders, your investors, your customer, okay? Because your customer is what is going, who's going to drive where your business is going to go. So I like to share this because this is great because, you know, we go, I work with entrepreneurs, I work with small businesses in consulting, and what I find is that the customer wants this, but the engineer has, you know, built this, okay, or built this, okay, and didn't even talk to the customer. The salespeople have embellished what the customer really wanted because they want a bigger commission. You know, I love how the customer was billed, okay, overbilled, and then, but this is what the customer really wanted. And I raised that because we didn't spend enough time with the customer really understanding what their needs are. And hopefully out of this discussion, you get a sense of why we do this, and then how, and then what are some of the tools. All right, so understanding customers. This guy, Garber, out of Harvard Business School, says, studies comparing successful and unsuccessful companies, okay, and the primary discriminator was the degree to which you understand your customer. So, have they gotten a business model canvas or anything like that yet? Okay, I'll talk about it a little bit later on. But I always start in B310, and I even bring them my marketing classes. Understand who your customer is. We ask clients, who is your customer? Paint the picture of who your customer is. And then what are the questions you're going to ask your customer? Because it's very critical that you understand your customer situation. So you'll hear MBAs. Have you touched in your marketing class about voice of customer? Okay, so you understand the whole concept of voice of customer in terms of you're trying to understand the requirements of the customer, better solutions. You're doing focus groups, one-on-ones, surveys. You're doing observational. I know in BlueLink you're going to be doing observational. But this is one way of being able to gather data. But there's some biases within VOC. Look at these questions. How would you improve this product? What features would you like to be added? Why is your present solution made? These are classic VOC questions. What's interesting or what's wrong with these questions?
The customer has to know what problems they have.
Okay, one observation.
You're dumping the creativity portion on the customer to figure out what they need.
Okay, that's another. Okay, anyone else? Look at keywords. Boom, boom, boom. Vantage. Because this is a big problem that a lot of businesses have. They operate from the product. My product. Okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about disruptive innovation a little bit. But the problem that a lot of business has, they create the product and then they want to modify the product. So they go to the customer and they sort of do some interviewing and get voice of customer to do some tweaking so it modifies. But they don't really get what the customer needs are. So what happens is you get what we call incremental breakthroughs. iPhone 5, iPhone 6. You notice this with a lot of our products. They're like little tweaks, maybe a new little extra feature, different color. But are they really breakthrough? Are they really something that's going to change the world? Why did Kite Pharma get bought for $12 billion last week? Because it came with technology, which is CAR-T technology for treatment of lymphoma. That is a radical breakthrough. Okay, rather than the traditional incremental, let's do more chemotherapy, monoclonal antibody, this, the next. It says, let's take your T cells, we're going to program them with the antigens of the tumor cells, and they're going to infuse them back and then have your body. So immunotherapy, again, use your immune system. By the way, that's how we produce cancer cells all the time. The reason why we keep them in check is our immune system does this. The guy who did this is his second startup that he's made. The first one he did several $100 million. He sold Cougar to J&J. But this was a $12 billion. This is big to Gallia. But it marks in terms of what we call disrupting innovation. Okay? So how many of you guys heard of a guy named Clayton Christensen? What do you know about him?
He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, The Innovative Solution, and he believes in disruptive solutions aren't ones that, he contrasts disruptive solutions from incremental solutions, and that disruptive solutions initially aren't wanted by the target market, but by the time the target market knows that they want the better one, it's too late for incremental solutions to catch up. Things like why CDs overtook VCRs or why iPods overtook CDs. Initially no traction, but eventually the better disruptive innovation captures the market faster than incremental breakthroughs ever could.
A little bit. I think he got one piece of it, and he actually put a piece last fall in Harvard Business Review. I think I may have dropped that in your package of stuff to read. If not, I have that. I don't know, what is this? I need a disruptive innovation for this stuff. So, concept is, most everybody, sustaining, tack on. Disruptive is understanding that there are customers out there that are not being addressed, and building an MVP that addresses what the needs are. The biggest, I'll give you a few examples of disruptive, classic disruptive. Netflix, what problem were they solving? No.
DVD rentals?
Bingo. People hated if you missed, bring it back the next day, you were getting tapped another day or two, a penalty fee. People hated that. They hated the inconvenience of having to go out and look and not find what you can get, where you can order. Airbnb, what are they disrupting? Okay, why?
Because they're offering individuals who aren't using their apartments to rent outsiders.
Right. So, and doing it at a cost, right? You go to San Francisco, I don't even go to hotels now. I go to Airbnb because they're half the price, and I get a personalized experience that's there. Geez Louise. Digital, okay, versus film, because the frustration of the customer was having to go and develop. So the point is that to think about, you can disrupt by thinking about your customer and thinking about customers that are not being addressed. And that's what Clayton Christensen talks about, and he brought that out in his article last year, because disruptive innovation is one of those things next to strategy that gets so abused with so many different definitions. But this is something, if you're thinking about making a big impact, whether it's social impact or whether it be in terms of business to help patients, we have to be able to think out of the box. By the way, he has a great book on disruptive innovation for healthcare as well. And he's totally rethinking how we do the hospitals and how we treat cancer and how we may want to use more mini clinics and stuff like that.
Is it the innovator's prescription?
Exactly. So, outcome approach. This is what we're thinking about. What's the job to be done? What are the pain points? So as you go through and you're doing your observation, you start, and I teach this in my 310 class, what are the pains that the customers are feeling? Okay, how big of a pain it is? What are the needs? What are the unmet needs? So when I do market research for startups, because I do that as part of my consulting, we're trying to get at those. What are those unmet needs that clinicians have? What are the unmet needs in the marketplace? I'm dealing with some market research right now in the pain marketplace, because we have a tremendous unmet need relative to dealing with this opioid epidemic, and that we overprescribe opioids that could be treated with other pharmacologic interventions. And what are the desired outcomes that the customer's wanting? And this is what I find with so many businesses. People think the customer doesn't know what they want, all right? When in reality, the customer knows, because they have a job to do. Here's a very good example of that. You know, customers didn't need to know that they needed satellite radio, but they didn't know what they wanted in terms of things. They wanted a wide range of music and talk to it. They wanted music and talk programming. They wanted little or no interference from transmission, because that's always what drove me when I go up and down the state, is I'd be listening to AM radio and FM radio and I'd lose my channels. And less advertising during listening. People thought that Sirius and XM was a joke. No more, it's standard. And I don't think there's a car that is built today that doesn't have that offered, right? So that is an example of understanding customer job to do. So think about the job. It's got to be stable, it's got to be long-term, and the customer uses many different products, okay, to perform the job, okay, but the job remains constant, okay? It's sort of like an itch to scratch. So you need to understand that. And why it is that they're using different things, because you want to find out how much of irritation is that itch to scratch. Because that's what you want to find out. Gary and I were talking before about coffee. We were talking about a situation, and he said, my question was, okay, is it a need? Is it in the top 5? Is it 1 or 2? And by what degree? And firms must capture those unmet needs surrounding jobs to make sure that the customer is satisfied. If you hit the sweet spot, product will take off. If you don't, it'll probably go to the graveyard. And unfortunately, we see this. I see this up in, where I live in Paso Robles part-time. I see it in the wine business all the time. People create products that people don't want. They think they're creating a piece of art. In fact, what is the #1 reason why a business goes out of business? Startup. Garrett.
Nobody wants it.
Right? 67%, I think, was rated on that survey. Okay? So, understand what people want. So here are some typical job statements. Doing oneself. Taxes. How many of you have had to do taxes on your own? How much of a pain is that? How many of you use some type of some software solution as a result? Okay? Make it a little easier. Okay? Treating a simple wound at home, installing filters in the house, cleaning a public restroom, cleaning the inside of a car, replenishing metal working fluids in a machine shop. Okay, these are jobs that people do have. Okay, and say, God, I wish I had. And it's by going in and really understanding the job to do. So, like, you got to ask questions about the job. So here's a tax example. Okay, so what makes the job of doing taxes challenging, frustrating, inconvenient? Okay. I know with me it's paper, it's having to pull all my data together. What makes it time consuming? Because you have all these records you got to pull. What causes a job to go off track and why? I do have my records. And what aspects of the job are wasteful and why? I have paper and electronic records. Notice what's here as we're sort of digging and uncovering, we're peeling the onion. What do we have? We have a series of questions, open-ended questions. So be naturally curious and ask questions and try to break those, break down the problem that is there with the questions. Because if I understand the customer's job and the desired outcome, you move away from that sustaining innovation, which big companies actually, the funny thing about big companies, except for I've seen P&G and 3M, there's a few that do have innovation centers, but a lot of companies are incremental. And they made a lot of money by just incremental improvements. But as a result of being disruptive and understanding your customers, you will have better marketing and financial outcomes. And you will be a tougher competitor because you can properly differentiate yourself, because you differentiate yourself based on what the customer wants. You've listened to the customer. So this concept you guys can talk about, Lean Launchpad or anything like Steve Blank stuff?
Eventually, but I think it's good to give just some quick
I'll
context.
give you a quick snapshot. So Lean Startup, you guys familiar with Lean Startup? Okay, now let's scale it. That's basically the two base concepts, but Steve Blank and Eric Rice are two of the big proponents on it. Basically, the first phase of Lean Startup is to identify the customer, understand what the customer needs are. Customer discovery. This is what interviewing is very critical. Once you've discovered, and that's what we teach in 310, is doing a series of interviews, getting so they can build out their business model canvas. Then we go out and then we validate it. And we validate it with an MVP. We ask a lot of questions as well. Okay? Find out if we have something. If not, we're going to pivot. Once we have the business model and the product correct, then we can go out to execution. But even with execution, talking about, you have to have market research. So Hacking for Growth is a very good example by Sean Ellis, where now, how do you scale the company that's there? Now this gets into, when we're talking about lean startup, is the whole concept of customer needs. So you have a customer profile, and this is something you'll be exposed to when you have lean startup concepts, is who is the customer? What are the gains, the pains, and the customer jobs? And then we tie this back. We have an exercise that we do in our class that I teach, where we have them map the job, the customer issues with the value. What's going to create the gain, what's going to be the product, and what's going to relieve the pain that's there. And that becomes the foundation for your business. And this just ties into the other piece of lean startup, which is called the business model canvas, which in essence you put your guesses around your business, build your business model. On your right side is what I call your value side, which is how you extract value by understanding your customer, okay, and then marketing. But on the left side is how you operate. And again, you have to test with your customers, make sure that you have your model correct. Operations, and here we have in terms of the link together. And then finally is, in lean startup, we have a thing that we call the minimum viable product. Rather than build the most complicated, because I know this happens with a lot of folks, we have, and I see this in the sciences, the most complicated solution is the simplest solution that addresses across the customer needs. So I use the cupcake as an example of an MVP for a wedding cake. Why build a gigantic wedding cake when you can do it with a cupcake? So the smallest solution, line case your assumption. So this is the why, just so you understand the why. Why do we do interviews? The take home should be is, at the end of the day, you need to understand who your customer is and what is important to your customer. Okay? What keeps them up at night? I do this when I do consulting. What keeps you up? What's irritating? What's stemming your business from growing? If you had a magic wand, what would you like to see as a solution? So keep that a part of it, because that's what drives your business. If you do this, then you're going to be able to build out better solutions. So what you have to do is you have to ask the right questions. So as you can see, before we get to our risky assumptions, what do you think about our color of packaging first? I actually had a marketing student in my senior project of marketing who had the logo done before we even built position and concept for the product. Doesn't it look pretty? Let's back it up a little bit. Did you talk to customers? This is what you want to think about relative to customers, how they want, relative to what you're trying to create in brand. What you're trying to do is push what you think the customer wants. Steve Jobs actually was one of the few people who got away with doing that. And he's one who's been quoted as customers don't know. But realistically, to be successful, you really do need to understand the customer. Now this guy, I took a class with him last summer. Scott Worthridge is the vice president at Foursquare Market Research. So you know the phones where they come and they have little things that pop up if you're in a store or something like that and they ask you to do search? That's what they do. They do all that market research and point of purchase. You walk into a store, you come into the zone, and they are tracking you. And they have folks who are customers that they're with the product. They can take a picture and then they can send it to Foursquare Mobile Market Research. So they're changing the way that we interact and we're gathering data. But one of the things that I learned was what we call the magic circle, and it's to design your interviews with a strategy. So we call this magic circle. I'm going to give you high level so you understand at least the high points. So the first thing is understanding the problem. So when I start with market research with a client, what I will ask them is, what's your objectives? What do you want to get out of this? What are the questions that are burning? This is the most critical piece you sit with. When I have advisory boards, I've done over 135 advisory boards, okay? What do you want? What is it going to look like at the end of the day that's going to be a success? What is the itch that you need to scratch? Based on that, you're going to then select the appropriate research design. All right? Your research design might be focus groups, it might be one-on-ones, it might be online surveys. You design, but you always build your design off what your objectives are and what your clients, and you link back to your clients in terms of what they want to know. So as you're doing your research, you've got to think about with your team and with your stakeholders, understand what you want to accomplish. Then you design the tool. And once you have that, you might even test the tool. Then you move into the data collection. And then finally into the communication. And there's actually a great piece I may put into the collection called Backward Market Research out of Harvard Business Review. It's great because one of the things you should be thinking about at the end of the day is, what are you going to communicate at the end of the day to your customer who is asked for this information? So you start almost at the end of the circle when you're starting at the beginning of the circle. In essence is, think about the story you want to tell as you're developing your objectives. Bring that on. So the take home here is, have a rationale, have a plan, have a strategy. So what do you do first? All right, let's get a little tactical. So we talked about objectives. There's 6 steps. You're going to have to do some background. So we do tertiary, so we do some secondary research. So you guys have already been exposed to library resources. You go out, you might find secondary sources and sales data from a company. You want to get some background research and prep. And when I do my one-on-ones, I've usually done a full medical background review. I've done epidemiology review, clinical review. I've done market review, because from that allows me to develop a few key topics that I want to drill down into. And then who are the people, who are the thought leaders, who are the customers that I need to get at? And when I'm doing that, so when I get with my clients and I'm pulling this, I might stop with my secondary research and present my secondary research, get feedback, and say, okay, let's go to the next step in terms of that circle. What do we want to accomplish in this next phase in terms of objective? What are your key questions? Make sure you got input. Very, very critical you get that input, because this way you satisfy. And then once you've done that and you've developed your question guide, then you can engage the interviewee. Right. And that means, guess what? You got to get out of the office. So Steve Blank talks about it in terms of, and we talk, it's called GOOB, G-O-O-B, which is get out of the building. But realistically, you need to be able to talk to, here in this case, the teenage girls. Okay? And I know it's intimidating, but guess what? You might have the perfect excuse for why you need to talk to a teenage girl, because you need to understand what their needs are so that you can design the proper product. Okay? But you got to have, part of that plan is you have to have, again, more strategy. So another concept that we do when we build out an interview is we have what we call an interview guide. And I teach this whole concept of what we call the funnels. Because if you think in funnels in terms of major buckets of the interview, you could actually do your interview without having to have a script. So first you start with screening, because you want to know, is this a proper person to be interviewing or not? And then you get into, you want to have what we call icebreakers. Okay, and those icebreakers are just, you can get attitudes, understand who they are, you know. Why did you want to get in, start, like we were doing this one project last year with the Berkeley team, is why did you want to get into a startup? Tell me your attitude about doing a startup. What's your experience? Okay? Now, and then you get into what we call the job to do. Okay? What have you done? Okay? What have been your pains, and you know, what have been your priority issues? And then how much is number 1 and number 2? So you're drilling down. and then addressing that job to do with potential solutions. Many times when I teach goobs, I teach, when you do this interview, I hold off in terms of presenting the solution. I just get the information around the needs. In contract market research, if you have a product, you might actually want to tee up what we call a target product profile and get some feedback. So my clients will say, all right, tee up a basic TPP, let's get some feedback, see if we get some traction or not, okay? You will also hear the term what we call MVP, or minimum viable product, okay? Because what you want to get a sense of, is this close to what their needs are or not, okay? And then you want to see how they value it, and then identify next steps in the process. But the point about the funnels is if you create, as you think about your interview, and you break your interview into maybe 5 or 6 steps, and you think about your big buckets, in essence, as you meet somebody on the street, and you've thought about your big buckets and they become second nature, you can conduct that interview. And guess what? When you conduct that interview, it's more natural, it's unforced, it's not staged, and you know what? People open up more that way. So, another tool? What?
5 to 10 minutes.
Oh.
I know, I just wanted to give you a heads up, so I got
All
I got to cover too.
All right, so you have to have objective setting as you do interviews and interview guide. And you got to know that you got to have the right customers, okay? So you need to make sure as you're doing this process that you get to the right customers. Now, the other piece is that when you do and you approach, what you need to do is you need to be able to tee this up. And putting out an email or to some sort of formal type of communication in terms of the why and why this person's important is very critical to get buy-in. I find many times having referrals from other thought leaders helps me a whole lot. But here's a basic structure of something that you might have for an email in terms of how you're connected with your purpose, relevant background, how much time, maybe your key questions, and then, you got 5-10 minutes, half an hour that we can be able to talk. And when I do an interview, I frame it, okay? And then, I'm going to leave the slides, but the acronym is VERPA, which is basically you got to frame. When you go into an interview, you want to set the tone for where this interview is going. So in the interview, in the beginning, break the ice, get to know them, okay? It's sort of like going out on a date. Start with softball questions. In the middle, okay? Drill down deeper. Have your key questions that you've set up in your funnels. Okay? Make it conversational. Make sure you're active and you listen. Okay? Nod, eye contact, lean in. Body language is very, very important. Don't pitch your product. And watch your time. So Garrett's in the back, okay, I got 5 minutes, boom. When you're doing this, you've got to be able to watch your time so that, with a physician that I interview, I may only have 30 minutes. Put the head down and gotta get through the most important priority questions that are there. And at the end of the interview, summarize your key take-homes, ask if anyone else, I always ask for, do you know anybody else? And I also ask is there anything that I missed as a question? And just let them know if there's any next steps. So what I do, I personally take notes, but if you go and you tape, so if you do interviews, if you tape, ask for permission to tape. In the state of California, you're required to do that, okay, taping interviews. And usually most people do that, okay? And it's good because you can play it back or you can take the MP3 and you can send it up to like rev.com and you can get a transcript. Or you can have another person, like McKinsey usually has teams, and that person takes notes. And that allows you to focus on the questions and watch the body reactions while the other person is taking notes. So after the interviews, have your notes. I actually write up my interviews literally an hour after my interview, and I send a page and a half out to the client and give them feedback because it's fresh in your mind. Okay? I also like personally taking my notes because it makes me an active listener. Okay? You notice when you take notes that you're much more active in your listening. And send a thank you note, keep your team in the loop, and update your business model canvas. you gotta make sense of the interview. So you're gonna have to look for patterns and quantitate, and you might have to explore false positives. I had this when I was interviewing 2 doctors actually last June. One was very positive with response to our target product profile. The other one was very negative. So you really have to remember, N of 1 is an N of 1. You've got to look for patterns. And then put together a summary report. I always find for clients it's useful, but even for your team. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. What were your objectives? What were your key learnings? Put in bullet points, page to a page and a half max. So, 5 minutes on questions. All right, 5 W's and the H. Very critical that you think about that all the time. This is the W we're talking about. Key operant thing is open-ended questions. Don't put people into a corner. And when you have open-ended, drill down, okay? So have a strategy that when you have your question guides, that you have maybe some follow-ups, because that allows you to seize opportunities and maybe egg on for clarification. And with clarification, sometimes you have to notice in saying somebody may repeat or parrot. You've been in an interview where somebody says, I think I heard you say that. They're trying to just clarify that they heard of this. And at that point, you couldn't use what we call closed-ended questions. And here, I'm not a big fan of closed-ended. As a matter of fact, my students when they send me funnel worksheets and they have closed-ended, I usually mark them down points. I like open-ended. So think about how you could ask that yes-no question a different way. Like on a scale to 1 to 5 to 1 to 7. Okay? Or if you do have to, always tag it with the power question, which is why. And watch out for framing. So this is a framing example, but the way you tee up your data, there you go. The way you tee up your data, and lawyers do this routinely, can frame how someone will answer the question. So as you see across those 4 options, how one may look better than the other, they all have the same solution. But it's how you set up and frame those questions. Okay? All right, frozen yogurt, 20% fat. Frozen yogurt, 80% fat-free. Which looks better? Fat-free. Okay? So, and it's very important, and you watch political commentary, everything's being framed. And you want to refrain from leading the witness. It is very, very important, because what happens is, I see this time and again, especially when an entrepreneur is very tied to a product, you can inject bias. And don't fall into a pitch. I call this the act of death. If you go into a pitch mode, what will happen is somebody saying, yeah, that was great, or whatever. Guess what? They've turned off from your interview. You're not getting. They basically want to say, your baby is beautiful, don't bother me anymore. Now, there is 2 of us, and we actually teach at the same institution. So this is the other John York, okay? And he wrote a great paper, which I think I included in your pack there, about biases that are there. And there are several different biases that are there in terms of selection, confirmation, generalization, overconfidence, optimism, and acquiescence. Be aware of the biases that you can bring. It is a big problem. And it's one of the critique of lean startup is actually the biases that an individual goes as an entrepreneur to asking questions because they want the answers to say their baby is beautiful. Okay? You want to know, I'd rather have somebody try to shoot down the product or the idea. Because if you extend out and thinking you have this wonderful idea and you go 3 years and you're not successful, guess what? You waste a lot of time and money. And there's a great book that follows it. I think I may have sent you a short excerpt on it called The Mom Test. Why is it called The Mom Test? You go to mom. Will mom ever tell you that whatever your idea is terrible? Okay? That's exactly. Okay? Talk about your customer and their life and what keeps them up at night. That's what's important. Okay? And ask about specifics rather than generalities. Listen more. Okay? Deflect comments, anchor fluff, because people are going to try to fluff because they want you off their back. And when you have an insight, dig. And you know what, for trivia, rather than have trivial questions, Google it. And there's an exercise, I do this with my class, we actually break out into teams and we take these 12 questions and we ask which are good and which are so-so and which are not good. So, I got 1 or 2 minutes?
Yeah,
We're just about at the end.
Yeah.
Notice how I'm sped it up. So, how many people, okay, so, which do you think's good questions? Do you think it's a good idea? Good, let's do good or not good?
Not good. Not good.
Not good, okay? Would you buy a product which did X?
Wait, go back.
Oh, God. All right. I don't know why it went on auto. I have to check
no
it again
idea.
to see if
Sorry
it was
about
on.
that. Yeah.
No, I should have double checked it. All right, buy product did X, not good. How much would you pay for X? Terrible. Don't talk about payment of product. What would your dream product do? That's not actually a bad question, because I use a similar called the magic wand. If you had a magic wand, why do you bother? That's actually a good question to define the motivation. What's the implications of that? That's a great digging. That's a why question. Talk me through the last time that happened. Have people tell stories. What else have you tried? Because that tells you the problem has stimulated so much of a bother that they're trying. This is just your early innovators. They're going to go and they're going to jury rig something up. Okay? Where does the money come from? Again, not a great question. Okay? Because we don't want to really get into. But sometimes when you're doing a selling situation, you want to know is this the person who is the beneficiary, or is this the person who's going to make the financial decision? Because many times you have a business, especially in healthcare, you may have the patient to benefit, an influencer or recommender like a physician, and then payers such as the healthcare plan. Okay, who else I should talk to? Great question. You should never end an interview without asking this, because you're never at a loss. If you're going to do I-Core, you're doing 100 questions. And is there anything else I should have asked? Outstanding, especially the physicians, because they'll come up with 5 different questions that I've uncovered needs at the end, because they always feel like they know more and they have more questions. So as you can see, we did pretty good. So at the end of the day, listening to the customer helps you get to those jobs to do. And if we understand the jobs to do, we might lead to some disruptive products. So hopefully at the end of the day, you've learned and taken away, 1, the why. Why do we do this? Because we really need to understand what the customer wants. 2 is how, and how is, there's a process. There's a strategy in terms of the magic circle, but there's a process for doing the interviews. And then you should think about the funnels, okay? So magic circle and funnels, very key to your strategy in laying out. And then the what, which is the key questions. Remember, questions are very good. You should always be thinking questions. But remember, there are good questions, like open-ended questions, and then there are not so good questions, like closed-ended or biased questions that are there. So with that, Garrett, hopefully I got within your time.
You did. Let's give John a round of applause. And I think we can all see that this nicely ties in with the needs finding and the clinical immersion that we're starting with. It's even good because it's a little more, definitely more advanced too in some of the interviewing styles that we'll be using later. So great timing. Thanks so much, John. Maybe if there's just maybe two questions or so from you guys, I'm sure there's many more, but I think we only have time for 2. Awesome.
I have one. So you said there's a bad idea to ask if the customer would pay for X. How do you develop pricing then? Do you not consult the customer or work with the customer when you're pricing a model? Like A/B testing?
I would do that later in the process. The early stage, you're trying to really understand, 1, who the customer and the need is. I probably would, once I have the solution and the solution has traction, you know, then there's a whole science too. But you know, if you are, like, if I go back to market research guy, he would say, as you go down this funnel path, at the end of that path where you define the job to do, then you might ask a question evaluating, and you could ask a question, because actually some of the students asked me in 310 this spring. I said, well, one way of doing that is you could ask, what have you done? What have you paid for in the past? Okay, it's a good way to anchor somebody. And in the marketplace, we do anchor versus competitors based on what the marketplace is paying for. The other way of doing this, if you have a disruptor, it's just, is there a price that would just be totally obnoxious that you would turn away and just turn your nose up? Okay? Or is there a price that you look at and you just would totally laugh at us because we're leaving money on the table? So that's a way of sort of starting to get a range, but I wouldn't get into it because there's a whole lot of market research that goes into pricing, so you do conjoint with elasticity to really get that down. Okay? Other questions?
Someone else? One more?
And I'm going to get knocked out for pizza.
Is there anything
Yeah, we
else
do
we
have
should have
pizza.
asked?
What? Shoot.
Is there anything else we should have asked?
I think there's 1,000 questions to ask that's here, and that's probably another lecture, like what goes into primary research, and how does your primary research set up your secondary research is one response that's there. Other? One more?
All right, well, thanks so much, Dr. York. Yeah, one more?
What is your email address, so I could answer more questions in the future?
There we go.
Okay?
That's always a good one.
Yeah.
All right,
All right, well,
thanks
thank you.
again. And he'll be around if you want to talk to him. And we do have some pizza for the break too, thanks to Gaurav.
And my apologies on the slide thing, hopefully it didn't disrupt.